we're live with Beth Knapp. This is episode number 10 of the Path to Follow podcast. Beth, it's a pleasure to get you in the studio here.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. How are you doing? How was the week? It felt like a long week to me for some reason, even though we had Monday off.
I feel like that always happens.
Yeah.
Right? When there's a shorter week, it gets condensed.
Yeah.
I also had a birthday this week, so it was like...
Oh, yeah. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
How'd it go?
Fine.
Yeah?
Fine, as like adult Tuesday birthdays go.
During COVID?
During COVID.
Yeah.
We had a fun weekend. So, but yeah, it has felt like a long week. And I feel like right now, you get to Friday and it's just like...
Yeah.
Exhaustion, right?
Well, I always tell my classes Thursday is my favorite day of the week because after Thursday, it's like you're just sliding down into the weekend.
I love that you have a favorite day of the week because I always tell my classes like I have a top 3. And Thursday is my third favorite day of the week.
Third favorite?
Yeah.
What's first?
Saturday.
Saturday's great too.
Yeah.
Thursday and Saturday. Sunday is a work day, basically.
Yeah, thumbs down on Sunday.
Yeah, no Sunday.
I don't like it.
What's your second?
Friday.
Friday. Yeah.
I'm kind of reconsidering that because I get like really wiped out on Fridays.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
But it's good we're podcasting on a Friday.
That's right.
Yeah. So, and I also dressed up for you.
Thank you.
We've been waiting for this day for a while here. We've been talking since the beginning of the podcast about getting you on. So.
So you're like blazer and tie.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I like it. Thank you.
Yeah. So Beth, let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about what you do here at Gilman. Really, how you found Gilman as a place to kind of teach and
right.
everything that you do here. I was telling Matt Zealand and Brian Ledyard about you coming on the podcast, and they both said she's a rock star. And I want to talk a little bit more about why you are kind of a rock star on campus here. So maybe we could just start out about your story and how you got into teaching. Would be awesome.
I grew up outside of Baltimore. I grew up in Bel Air and went to John Carroll. So I've always known Gilman and the Roland Park schools, and in a way that was like the schools here were like the kids were so much smarter and better at sports than we were then a long time ago. So it's always kind of been part of my galaxy. And it took me a little while to become a teacher. I think I always wanted to, but I did some other stuff. Mm-hmm. I worked in a nonprofit. I worked in book publishing in New York for a couple of years. And then I kind of fell into a teaching job at Georgetown Prep around in the early 2000s. And I was hooked. I just loved it. After having a series of jobs that I didn't want to get out of bed in the morning to go to, right? And then all of a sudden having this job that I was like leaping up early and just excited to like kind of pour myself into. And was surprised, I think, to find that like I gelled really well with like the all boys environment. That wasn't ever a thing that I was like, I want to teach at an all boys school.
Interesting.
But there's something about it that like was really fun and fulfilling for me. So I kind of like eased my way in, started like I covered a sabbatical, and then I had one section of sophomore English, and then
oh, that's nice. So you weren't really thrown into, teaching
no.
full load at the beginning.
Right. I got it. And I had, like, I was working as, when the year I taught one class, I was the assistant to the president of the school. So I was doing some administrative kind of work and teaching.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And then ultimately I moved into teaching full time. And then by the time I left Georgetown Prep, I was the English department chair, and my family and I were living in the dorms there. So we had varied experiences. Yeah.
Awesome. And what brought you to Georgetown Prep?
It was just like I was living in New York for a couple years and then moved to D.C. I went to college in D.C. and kind of wanted to get back there. And I have, so this is kind of a crazy thing about my family. I have 2 uncles who are Catholic priests, both of my mom's brothers. And one of them is a Jesuit. And when I was younger and growing up, he was the president at Georgetown Prep. So again, like I always knew of that school. And so when I moved to DC and needed a job, there were like people I knew, and they were like, we've got something. And then it just like 15 years later, I was still there.
Seems like the perfect fit to start off.
Yeah.
What was it like teaching all boys at first?
What
do you think it was that hooked you at the beginning, and you were like?
Here's the thing, like boys are funny.
Yeah.
And I think boys are funny, which is like, I'm not really sure that speaks highly of me, but like, it's like our senses of humor are similar. And so there was just like a lot of laughter and joy and frustration and annoyance. But like, I think that's what it was that hooked me.
Did you start out teaching older boys, younger boys?
Sophomores.
So you've been teaching sophomores for a while now.
Yeah, and I don't even really love teaching sophomores.
Really?
But I've been doing it for a long time.
Wow.
There must be something that works. Yeah.
And you teach seniors too here
I
at Gilman.
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is the sophomore boy? How do you connect? And I've observed some of your classes, and there's just like a great vibe in there. It seems very comfortable, and I've talked to a few of my students, and they all say Miss Knapp's class, it's very comfortable, and we can talk about what we want to talk to, and then somehow she connects it to the literature.
So there are a couple of things that I'm thinking about with that like question is I have over the last couple of years, like I'm a much better teacher. Like Gilman has made me a much better teacher, and I felt like I had some like pretty firm footing before I got here. But one of the things is that I've been really focused on building relationships in the room, and not just between me and the students, but amongst the students, and having like a cohesive unit. So I think that's starting to kind of bear fruit, that real intentionality around that. And then I don't know, I think I constantly remind myself of a couple of things. And one of them is that like the students are people, they're humans, right? And there are things that are going on for them outside of my room. Yep. And so leading with that kind of understanding and grace, I think makes a big difference. And then especially when I was a younger teacher, like one of my mantras was like, be the adult, right? It's like, I'm going to be the adult in this space, and it's going to the space is going to reflect my values.
And I think there's a middle ground for that, and I've said that before a little bit, is when I first came here in my first year, I put too much emphasis on that, I think.
Yeah.
And if you do that, it's almost a little bit too intense or rigid in the classroom, when it should just be free-flowing and kind of, relaxed, I would say, in some ways. Especially English, you're talking about, not only literature, but just life, right? And I think that relaxed atmosphere, especially for high school boys, has worked.
Yeah, it makes a big difference, I think. Yeah. And I also think it's a privilege of like being a mid-career teacher at this point, is like I'm a little less concerned about like maybe how they perceive me or that kind of thing, that allows for some more of that relaxation. For
sure. So when did you make the transition from Georgetown Prep? And by the way, Georgetown Prep, I must say, of all the independent school campuses I've been on, that place is ridiculous.
Ridiculous. And that was my home for 4 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what was it like living at a school like that? And I talked to Robbie Ford about this too. Living on campus you get all the perks.
Yeah, and I think there was a little bit different because it's about a quarter of the student body that lives on campus. So it's not like the full boarding school experience in that way. Like not everyone's there, but I loved my commute. I loved walking across the quad to class every morning, and I think it was wonderful. Like we had 2 really small children while we were doing that, and I was able to see them during the day. And I'm still in touch with a lot of those students that lived in the building with us and their families. And certainly my kids and I were exposed to like lots of different cultures because it was a really international group of students too. So it was an experience that I'm really glad that we had. I'm not all that eager to replicate it right now, but I think that there's like something amazing certainly about living on campus.
For sure. Yeah. And was your husband teaching there as well?
Yeah, so those last 4 years that I was at Prep, he came and he was teaching theology, and then he was the dean of the residential program. So he was like in charge of 125 boys like 24/7 while we had teeny babies.
Oh my God, that's a lot.
and I was teaching English, and so it was a lot. It was intense.
So how'd you make the leap to Gilman School?
I think as a result of that intensity and some thought about like what we wanted for our family life, and knowing that like my family is close by, and thinking like Baltimore is super cool. Yeah. Like it was like, okay, it's time to make that move. And I was just telling this story yesterday actually to a potential Penn Fellow candidate whom I spoke with, and I would drive by on Northern Parkway, like when I was in Baltimore, and I'd always be like, I think maybe I want to work there.
The place is pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. And as I had more experience, and I was like, I've got boys' school experience. Like, there might be something about my candidacy that seems all right. And then the other part is that Rob Hubeck and I went to the same high school.
Oh, right.
So, and I knew that he was here, and then when I heard that he was named upper school head, I'd be like, man, I wonder if Rob Hubeck will hire me. So.
What was Rob Hubeck like in high school?
Yeah. So Rob Hubeck's a little bit older than I am, and we were not in high school at the same time, but he's pretty legendary.
Yeah.
And he came back to teach, and he taught, I think, both of my younger sisters.
Oh, so he taught at John Carroll too? Okay.
He did when he was like
cool.
Brand new. Yeah, brand new teacher.
So you talked a little bit about the intentionality in your classrooms of building those relationships, and I've found it pretty hard right now to do that.
Oh my gosh.
Like I try to check in with guys on Zoom and but I have some guys that I've never even met in person really or seen.
I know.
And it's so hard to make those connections now virtually.
Yeah.
I also just feel like right now before the break, guys are getting a little burnout on the Zoom, which you don't blame them at all.
Right.
But it also makes you have to pull out a couple tricks and try to figure out how to get them on board for 25, 30 minutes.
I know,
Just stay
right?
with me.
Like, that's all I'm asking.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I'm not asking for anything more than that. I've struggled with that a lot this year, and I've spoken to like other colleagues about that. Is like there's something so. I keep using this word about like joy, but there's something so joyful for me about being in the space of the students and getting to know them that way, and not having that to its like fullest extent has been really, it's made me really sad, right? Like it's there has not been as much like excitement about like attacking each day. So I mean, I think I'm trying to rely on some of the same things that I've used last year in every class. Like at the beginning, I check in with every student and just like, how are you? What's going on? Like silly question, whatever. But it still feels a little hollow.
For sure. Where else, in addition to the check-ins, where else do you find that you're finding some success in the COVID? Especially the hybrid model is very tricky.
And then the hybrid model with coordinated classes. So with my senior class, it's like even another level of difficulty.
Right.
So I think that I've shifted focus a little bit to like, especially with my seniors, having them forge community with each other and taking myself out of that a little bit, in that I'm relying so much or asking them to do a lot of work in like shifting groups. And they just submitted some group projects, doing some context work on Jesmyn Ward Sing Unburied Sing last night. And I was just looking at them quickly this morning, and I was like tearing up because there was some beautiful work that they submitted that I don't think they would have had I been like more in the mix, right? There's something that about like allowing them to forge those relationships and then attacking something together that's produced really lovely work. So that's something for me to think about.
Did you send them off onto their own, I guess, Zoom calls to talk to each other to work on that?
Yeah.
Cool.
And they got, that's another thing that I'm really increasingly using all the time is they get to choose who they work with, and they got to choose their method of delivery for this, and they were a number of topics that they could pick. And so I'm finding as I practice that more and more, like the quality of work is so much better, especially with the older kids.
So Sing Unburied Sing is a popular book that I have yet to read, but I know Brian loves teaching it, and I did teach Salvage the Bones my first year here. What is Sing Unburied Sing about? And what are you kind of focusing on in that? This is award-winning novels, right? Okay.
Right. We're focusing on a number of things, and that's kind of where their context project comes in. But so I'm a little bit obsessed with Jesmyn Ward. Like I've been to her hometown, and I drove by her house.
Wow.
And like my husband Dan was really embarrassed. He was like slinking down in his chair. He's like, "What if she sees us?" So I think that she's just brilliant.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about her use of really ancient structures, right, and her use of mythology as she does in Salvage the Bones as
Yep.
well. And kind of, and because of English 10 as well, I think so much about retellings and how we retell stories in order to kind of make them our own. And I think that she's just an absolute master at that. So a lot about that idea, right, of using ancient stories from which Jesmyn Ward would have been excluded. And then Sing Unburied Sing has rotating narrators. So that's something that's complicated and interesting.
Yeah, difficult too, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and luckily it's not like as complicated, I think, as like when Faulkner does it, or maybe even I won't wade into the James Joyce territory because that's not my thing. But I think that there is some more clarity or accessibility with Jesmyn Ward. But and then another thing that we spend a lot of time with is that the mother in the novel is really unsympathetic. Like, it's really hard to associate with her. And so how do we continue to read her story and kind of get into her mind at the same time that thinking like everything she's doing is wrong?
Unlikable character.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was talking about that with someone else. Some of the, I don't know, like the new Netflix show that's on about the chess, Queen's Gambit.
Oh yeah, the Queen's Gambit. Dan started watching it. I haven't started watching it yet.
Apparently it's really good, but apparently the lead role or the lead character is unlikable too. So that came to mind, but.
Well, but that's like a really contemporary thing, right? Don't you feel like that's something that we're playing around with a lot in our zeitgeist right now? Like.
Yeah, for sure. And another show that connects to that is Succession. Have you seen that show on HBO?
Haven't.
All those characters are just
terrible.
Yeah. Interesting. Why do you think that is?
I think that I've thought about it a little bit, right, through these books. I think that we're so much more interested right now in understanding the complexities of who people are, right? And I think that we've done a pretty good job of, maybe on an individual level, we've done a pretty good job of kind of taking apart this idea of someone who is heroic and like putting them up on a pedestal. And I kind of corrected myself there because I think we're still doing it, but then we regret it in a lot of ways. Maybe there's something about people letting us down.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I mean, it feels like it's in the air, right?
For sure. Do you use kind of current event examples in this class to talk about something like that?
So I feel like I use current event examples more with the sophomores in like bridging between like older texts and where we are now. Okay. I feel like with this semester with seniors, I do maybe less of that because what we're reading is contemporary, and it has like these contemporary kind of markers throughout it, so it's already there. Interesting. But I love pop culture. Yeah. So I was thinking about that about an earlier question too. Like, it's really important for me to understand things kind of through a pop culture lens. So I think I do that a lot in class too. Yeah. It seems to me like everything that we read in my class, I see more in the world, and maybe it's just from paying attention to it on a more direct level through reading, but like things just pop up that I'll bring in, like even the night before. I forget what we were reading. We might have been reading one of Poe's stories in one of my classes, and it was like the vice presidential debate was the night before. And I brought in one example that I think worked, but like it's almost day to day that you can look for those current event connections. And I think there's something that's overwhelming for me about that because there's so much. And I am someone who likes to like consume a lot of information and like understand a lot of stuff, and I have like maybe an unhealthy relationship with Twitter. So do I. I'm like always it's like so addicting. It really is. Did you see the what's the new Netflix show? I haven't watched it. The Social, is that one? Social Dilemma. Yeah. So I watched it. I mean, it's not surprising, but it's also just like, addiction. It's pure addiction. I know. I know. I do love Twitter. But then I think, but it's informing me. That's my way of. It's making me smarter. It's making me more, aware of what's going on. I think. Right. But then we were talking with Matt Zealand on the podcast. It's like your Twitter probably looks way different than my Twitter, and then we have two different realities that we're living in. That's true. And I have done a little bit. I've been kind of intentional about following different people and just getting different perspectives on things, but it's definitely skewed, right? I follow more people that I agree with than I disagree with.
Right,
there are some people I disagree with that are in there, but yeah.
Definitely. So, so Beth, back onto your kind of path to Gilman and your story. Were there any kind of teachers or role models for you that led you into teaching, or was it something that you found on your own, would you say?
So I come from a family of teachers, so it was kind of part of our family culture, teaching, and an emphasis on the importance of education. I'm one of 3 girls, and my dad was very careful to tell us, to instruct us in being smart, and that was important, to like kind of, that was his way of combating some gender stereotypes. And I had an amazing 9th grade English teacher, Mr. Kleeman, who just was loving and brilliant and funny and like drew out the best in us. And I think like that experience in room 114 at John Carroll School was like,
still remember the room?
Yeah. And we corresponded for a long time, and he passed away, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago or something. I went to his funeral, but it was wonderful. And I think it was, that idea of the way people make you feel, and that's what you remember.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I've been thinking about that a lot.
Yeah. And I mean, I remember we read Romeo and Juliet and some other things in that class, but it was like the way I felt in that room. And with him, that was something I think I probably seek to replicate.
So you had a relationship with him when you were in class.
Yeah, and continued, right? And I think I can think of a number of teachers and professors, and I had an amazing poetry professor in college when I was at Georgetown, who was the poet laureate of Maryland at the time, and it was a poetry workshop. And I can remember, like, he wrote things to me that he saw something in me that I couldn't quite see, right? And I think that, like, every time I think about an influential teacher, that's part of it, right? Like, yeah,
and I've said before, I think it's the teachers that have made such big impacts on me in terms of my direction in life are ones who have told me that I was good at something, or because when you're in middle school and even high school, you don't know what direction you're headed at all. You're just kind of trying to get through the day and turn in all your work.
Yeah.
But when a teacher says, you're really good at writing, it's like, oh, maybe I'll do that a little bit more.
Right.
Or, you're good at cartooning. It's like, oh, maybe I should try to do that some more.
Right.
And that just has such a big impact on you, I would say.
It's huge, and it is something that I think about a lot on the other side as a teacher, and trying to recognize those things or giving kids the opportunities to showcase those things in the classroom, right? Yeah. So those are 2 major ones. And then mentors. I think that's a little bit like complicated, and I think that's a little bit complicated for me once I started to become a teacher because of like being a woman in a boys' school, and that like maybe the mentorship structure wasn't as much in place for me. I was like existing a little bit outside. Certainly there was like my dear friend who is head of school at a girls' school in Connecticut now, that was like academic dean at Prep, and she kind of encouraged me a lot. And I had some other people there, but I felt like there was a lot that I was like forging my own path. And I hadn't really realized that until I came to Gilman, and I think Gilman has like such, at this point, right, such a robust and such a robust mentoring program, and I was like, wait, I'm not sure I got that. Yeah,
I think Gilman, it's an awesome place to start a career in teaching because there's so many people that are just helping you along.
Right.
Cool. So at Gilman, who would you say? I guess what else are you involved in here at Gilman that I would say you are that mentor for a lot of people, and you do a lot of different things here. You wear different hats here at Gilman.
Yeah.
That you help either students or teachers, or you talked about the Penn Fellowship a little bit.
Right.
Right. In the hiring process too.
Yeah.
What other roles do you occupy where you are the mentor?
Yeah. there are a lot of hats I feel like I'm
Yeah.
wearing at this point.
And that's what I love about these conversations is we can kind of talk about those.
Yeah. So I think in like an unofficial, in an official and unofficial capacity in terms of the mentorship, like I've been really lucky to be like an official mentor to like new teachers over the past 5 years, right? And new to Gilman teachers. And those relationships have varied between just someone who's coming in and is pretty seasoned, knows what they're doing, and I'm just kind of answering questions about Canvas, right?
Yep.
To I think maybe sometimes some more difficult conversations about what's not working. I really enjoy those, although it's something that I am really working on how to have more kind of constructive conversations. Like it's really easy for me to be affirming, and it's a little bit more difficult for me to say like this is something that needs to change.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot about being clear and being clear in those mentor relationships. I love Brene Brown, a social worker and researcher, and she says that to be clear is to be kind. And so I'm thinking a lot about like how to be clear with people that I'm mentoring and like in order to like help us all improve. And then I think there's like an unofficial thing that's happened.
Clear in the sense of
expectation, expectations, or like because I always like my default is to be nice,
right? And I think most people who teach, right, are kind and want to help you and want to affirm,
right?
When I was, it was my first year teaching, and Brian would observe me. He'd be very complimentary, and like I felt really good about it, which I think is so important.
Right.
But it was also like, Brian, tell me how I suck. Like, tell me what I'm doing wrong.
How did that work? What kind of constructive feedback did he give you?
I mean, he has a really, I think it's a talent, but it's definitely developed over time.
Very awesome talent.
But but he can criticize and put such a positive, nice spin on it, where I kind of have to read through the positivity and be like, all right, maybe I did this. This was a confusing activity in that class.
Yeah.
But he's very good at that.
Right.
And I would agree. I do like that direct criticism. I'm used to that. When I was watching film in college, the coach would be up there and be like, dude, look at yourself. Look what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're just standing and picking your nose and watching, and you're not moving at all. And be like, all right, I get it. That's a just different way of criticizing. I prefer Brian's method for sure, but, both work. I think both direct, clear feedback it's important.
Right. Yeah, and I think that there's something different about those, the settings, right? So receiving criticism for your athletic performance, there's an expectation that it's going to be there maybe in a harsher way versus in a classroom setting or a professional setting, maybe you receive it differently.
Yeah,
too.
I think so. Know. And it depends on the person too.
Yeah, yeah.
I know people that if you did that to them and you tell them, if you're that direct, they wouldn't take it well.
No, right.
Especially as a teacher in the classroom, you'd be like, you feel bad about yourself.
Right.
Some people can read through it and take that feedback in kind of a positive, falling forward direction.
Right. Right.
Yeah, it's just knowing the person, knowing the situation.
Yeah. Well, and I think about it a lot too because in my experience, Gilman is not necessarily easy to immediately like get to know and figure out. Sorry, I snapped. And so I think because I know that I want to ease that transition a little bit for others, and particularly for other women who are coming in to teach here. And so, but I also am trying to be more intentional about the clarity of that message too, right? That sometimes these things are difficult. You need to ask questions. Or like this is something cultural about this school that maybe no one's told you, right? Because I think there are things that are like culturally understood, but are not necessarily just expressed.
Yeah, vocalized. Maybe.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in that. Like as a woman at Gilman, at an all-boys school, what are some of those maybe areas of growth here for women coming in to teach? Because I can imagine it's a totally different situation. I talked to Drew about this a little bit too, and her experience teaching all boys.
Yeah.
And even this year for me, teaching all boys, because we got rid of the coordinate.
Yeah.
It's a totally different job. What is it? What is it like, kind of as a woman coming to an all boys school to teach?
Yeah. I mean, I can only kind of say what my experience has been, and I know that, like, just talking to other women, that there are shared parts of this, but there is something that feels really important about it, and that they're just almost just like the optics of me being in charge of the classroom, or the optics of me standing in front of assembly. Like, I think that's really important.
Very important, yeah.
Right, and of course, then that's more pressure for me, I think, internalized, right? So that's important, so I'm going to live up to it and do a really good job. And I think I'm thinking a lot about how boys recognize women as leaders, and that seems like a little bit more of a leap for them to make, or it's a little bit more difficult for them to get there. It's more of a natural fit, and it's easier, I think, and I'm not you, but like, I think it's easier, like the boys can recognize they like know your story, and they like know your athletic successes and your academic successes and artistic successes, and they're like, oh, that guy's awesome, right? And so I don't think that kind of generosity or understanding is automatically given to women in the way it is given to a lot of men. So I think that there's more work that I have to do to say, like, no, I'm invested in you, and like, I'm kind of okay, and like, you can trust me, and I can lead us someplace.
Does that type of work occur on a personal basis, or how does that happen?
I think it's like a personal basis, that they're, again, going back to that idea of developing like relationships.
Yeah.
That's really important. And then I also think it's like really knowing my stuff, right? I mean, if you hear about this for anyone who's like outside of like the norm in anything at all, right? That they feel like they kind of have to work twice as hard. And I'm not sure I feel that anymore, but I certainly have felt it, right? And especially like, I think Gilman boys and adolescent boys in general are pretty quick, pretty quick to judge, right?
Yeah.
And so you gotta like be on your toes.
Yeah. I would say a lot of people, even outside of the age of a teenage boy, are quick to judge.
Yeah.
But yeah, I also think, we're reading the Scarlet Letter right now, and I told the guys today, I was like, if you're not reading this book like you're reading about yourself, you're probably doing it wrong. And that's true of all literature. If you're not reading it, looking at as if it were you, or seeing yourself through the characters, then you're not reading it correctly.
Yeah.
And I think the Scarlet Letter is such an important book to teach, because Hester Prynne is that female character that maybe boys, when they first pick it up, are like, maybe I don't have much in common with Hester Prynne, right?
Yeah.
But you do. You have a lot in common with her, and there's a lot you can get out of, not the lessons, but really her character and the different sides of her and what she represents. But I think teaching books like that and talking about characters like that in an English class might help teenage boys see women, or see humans differently. Right.
I think that's right. And I also am kind of mystified and trying to understand, like, why is it maybe that boys in particular, right, are more drawn to books that have boy characters, or are more drawn to the boy characters? Like, that's something that I feel like they are pretty frequently given. And so maybe like stepping outside and having to empathize with someone who is not like them is maybe more of an exercise. I don't know. And I think that's something that's changing.
Do you think it's a natural thing?
I do think it's a natural thing. But I also think in a lifetime as a reader myself, I don't remember having those same feelings of being like, oh, this book is narrated by a boy, so it's not for me. And certainly I read lots of books that were boy and male centric in my academic career, you know?
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah. I just wonder about it.
Yeah. Maybe it's different for females when you're reading a book about a character versus males, and what that is a product of.
Right. I mean, I think it's the same with if we extend that to other forms of representation, right? I think that like African American students are so used to reading books about white characters, and that white students are not as used to that, so that it's more of a hurdle for them when they access the text to be like, oh, this book isn't about me, right?
Yeah, at the same time, and this is a question I want to ask you, is when you're reading about Hester Prynne, you're not actually reading, maybe at the surface level it's about a female character, but if you dig beneath that, right, and that's what it's really about, is her characteristics as a person that are similar to yours. This is a question I have about just like some of the things that we are doing in the English department is including mini voices in our curriculum, which I think is totally important. And, you know, kids need to see themselves wherever that may be in whatever characters.
Right.
But a lot of that is including authors of, you know, different backgrounds and races and genders, right, in the curriculum. But for example, Nathaniel Hawthorne's a white man, right? And Colson Whitehead is another book that I teach, and he's a man. Mm-hmm. But the protagonists on both of their books that I teach are both females. Right. And we don't talk about Hawthorne that much. We don't talk about Colson Whitehead that much. We talk about Hester and Cora a lot. Mm-hmm. So just that direction of including texts with certain authors with, you know, different backgrounds is important for sure. But it's really about the characters, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's so much there. One thing I'm thinking, and it's been a while for me with the Scarlet Letter, but Hester Prynne is in the situation that she's in because she's a woman, right? Can you take her gender out of, does the story happen without her gender?
I think because she's a woman, she's having the child, but also Dimmesdale's in the same situation as well. I mean, they're in two different predicaments, but at the end of the day, it's the same sin.
It's the same sin, but who's paying more for it?
I think Dimmesdale is paying.
You do.
I think he's paying more for it from a guilt perspective,
okay.
And that's what we discussed in classes. Like, whose sin is worse?
Yeah.
Hester's come to accept the Scarlet Letter, and you know, yeah, she suffers and she's shamed from society, but Dimmesdale is dying because of the guilt that he feels. Mm-hmm.
I also think that there's an interesting thing there, and I think about this in a larger context too, is like the physicality, right? So like carrying a child, right? What does that do to kind of like shift how that works with like the gender dynamics in that book, or just in general, right? I don't know. That's another conversation.
Yeah. I might not be there yet.
I don't know that like Path to Follow podcast needs my thoughts about pregnancy and childbirth.
Yeah.
I think that I'm really intrigued. Actually, Colson Whitehead, that example is pretty interesting because I am very intrigued by that when there is a woman author whose main character is a man or vice versa. I think that's really fascinating, and I think that gives a lot. That opens us to a lot of discussion. And I don't think it negates anything, right? And I think that your point is valid, that by focusing on the author, maybe that doesn't really give us the fullness of the diversity that we're seeking in the classroom. I think we do have to look at like the characters and how they're represented. So, yeah.
Interesting. So Beth, in addition to teaching, so you teach award-winning novels for seniors and then the 10th grade curriculum. What are some other things that you do here on campus?
So for the past, I think the previous 4 years, right, I was the Writing Center director, and now Kelsey Carper's doing that this year.
I do want to talk to you about that because writing is such a hard and I'd say time-expensive skill to teach, especially in these times right now. You can't really sit down with students and say, you know, the sentence is improperly structured. Right. And how, as a Writing Center specialist or the head of the Writing Center, is that the title?
Yeah, director
of the Writing Center. What are some things you emphasize in terms of the importance of writing?
So one of the things that I did is like kind of polled the other teachers in the English department when I was kind of first getting started in that role about like things that they thought were important. And because I'm interested in a way to see if we all think that the same things are important. And generally, I think we do, right? And that has to do with like clarity and carefully worded and thought out thesis statements and topic sentences and some things about word choice. I actually think one of the things that was most influential in the Writing Center was just seeing the collaborative work that happened, and that was really where my emphasis was, is that, and I think that Patrick Hastings has said this too, that that's a real something about Gilman culture, the older guys helping out a lot of the younger guys and willingly doing so and willingly having kind of an exchange of intellectual ideas, which is pretty fantastic.
Teaching mentorship.
Yeah. And I'm also pretty fascinated by how people become good writers. Like, I haven't figured that out, and I thought about it a lot. And I think that there is something that's kind of, someone just is a good writer. And I can teach someone to be like technically sound, or we can talk about grammar, or we can talk about how to make transitions, and I always say build like word bridges. But I'm not gonna be able to teach someone to write beautifully and fluidly and who doesn't already do that. I think by like 10th, 11th grade, I think the guys who are really the most superior writers have been doing that for a long time. And I think that they're also really invested readers.
I think it's all about reading.
Yeah.
How much you read dictates how well you write.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that they're at all separate. I have a quotation on the wall in the Writing Center that Toni Morrison said, I think writing and reading are not all that distinct for a writer. And I think that's absolutely true. They're of a piece, right? And it's something that's influenced my parenting too, because I have a 4th grader who's a voracious reader.
Oh yeah. How do we get my little sister to start reading?
I wanted to ask about her. How old is she?
She's in 5th grade.
Okay.
And she doesn't really like to read much
No.
or write much.
Yeah.
She loves to play in the neighborhood, and she's very social, which is another, that's
awesome.
It's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So Eamon is not terribly social. So I don't know if like you have to choose one or the other as a little kid.
Yeah.
But he's like a real reader, but he's also a laborious writer because he wants to get it right. He's not just like dashing stuff off, and it's a painful process.
Wow. So handwriting wise.
Well,
or just in his writing.
Like actually the ideas. Like he's got all of this stuff in his head, but maybe as a result of reading so much, he knows like what sounds good, and so it takes him a long time.
He's got a lot of pressure with 2 English teachers.
Well, he does have a lot of pressure.
To live up to.
I know, poor guy. And Emmett, my younger son's just going to be like, nah.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, how, you could be really interested in doing that and doing that on your own.
Right.
Or you're like my sister, and it's like you have to drag her to the kitchen table and get her to sit down and read a sentence.
What is it like not to, like, see her all the time? Is that hard?
Well, so when COVID picked up, I went home for a little bit back to Philly. So I was around for the summer.
Oh, nice.
And then school started up, so she's busy with that, and I get home a good amount back to Philly.
Okay,
so I keep up with her. But
does she like FaceTime you and stuff? Like,
she's out playing in the neighborhood.
She's like, I got no time for you, man.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I keep up with her, and my mom's helping her. I don't know how you do it with younger kids right now,
it's
and
hard.
You're doing your own job, you're creating your own papers, and then your kids are lucky that your son will do it on his own. Sounds like.
I know, yeah, but there's still like wrangling to do homework. It's hard.
Yeah. Sit down and focus up.
Yes. And I'll be like, and I am like, I think I'm not the same kind of. I'm not like that. The teacher that I am in school is not how I'm presenting at home. I'm just get it done. Yeah.
You're more direct. You're straight to the point.
Yeah.
Love it. So another thing that you do on campus, the Finney-Greene Program, and you were newly elected to that position.
Yes.
So how is that, or maybe for people who don't know, we can explain a little bit about what the Finney-Greene Program is.
Right.
Some of the history and then what has it been like during these times?
So it's an amazing, Finney-Greene Scholars Program is an amazing program here at Gilman, and we have 31 students from 6th through 12th grade as Finney-Greene Scholars this year. I'm like the co-director and the upper school president, and Eric Marner's in the middle school, so we collaborate a lot. We kind of work with admissions on recruiting and identifying young men who are going to be good fits for us. So what it is it's generally kind of first generation Gilman students or independent school students, and boys of promise who have demonstrated some great promise academically, artistically, athletically, who may just need some more support to transition to a place like Gilman and to make it through. So in addition to having an advisor, form chair, all of that in a sense I'm kind of like the glue between all of those people. Mm-hmm. And keeping focus on what that student needs. And those 31 boys have like 31 different sets of needs, from kind of like financial to social to, academic support, whatever that is. So it has been a really big learning curve, and it has been very difficult to do under these circumstances, mm-hmm. right? And again, that idea of building relationships, not super easy right now, right? I'm trying to build relationships not only with the students but with their families, which is a probably increased degree of difficulty. So I think I'm a big believer in it. I think it's a really important, hugely important thing to do. And Mike Molina, the previous director in the upper school, shared with me this notion of being a steward of belonging, which he borrowed from Rodney Glasgow. But I think about that a lot, right? What it's like to come to Gilman if you haven't had any attachments before, and how the program can be, and we all can be stewards of belonging, of welcoming in, and then giving the students the support that they need to stay and to be successful. I think it can be really intimidating to come into a new place and then maybe not even, and I think this applies to the mentoring conversation too, right? To not even know what the questions are that you should be asking, mm-hmm. Or not even know what the help is that's available. And so I think that I'm really trying to be, again, clear and transparent about what help is available and communicating about needs.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So 2 parts of the position that interest me are, number one, how you identify a student that would fit to this program.
Right.
And then not only communicate the different support systems in place, mm-hmm. but kind of ensure that they're utilized.
Right. That part's, I think, the big trick.
Because for me, coming to Gilman, there's so many different ways that you can find connection or, mm-hmm. or help here, mm-hmm. but you do have to, it has to be a bit of a two-way street, and that might be hard in high school, especially coming from somewhere else. So that ensuring part and making sure that those connections are made is probably one of the more difficult parts of this role.
It is, and I think it's one of the most important parts,
mm-hmm,
right?
For sure.
And I think it's really difficult, again, right now. That has been a lot for the boys who are in the middle school, communicating with people who knew them best in middle school. That has been a lot of me introducing myself to the group of Finney-Greene families. That has been a lot of me communicating and just really trying to engender trust, mm-hmm. right? That I am here, we are here to help. So I think that there's a whole ton of work for me to do on that, and I kind of continue to grow in that. Your other question about kind of admissions and identifying boys is as it's been set up for the last couple of years is throughout the admissions process that Owen Daly and others in the admissions office would see an application and think, okay, so, this boy is coming from a school that is not typically a feeder school of ours, or, maybe his parents didn't go to college, or maybe, he's living with his grandmother, or whatever. There might be something on the application. He is a really, really talented musician, mm-hmm. And might need some kind of support in maintaining that and doing school. So as it's been existing, the admissions office kind of identifies those candidates throughout the process, and then this will be my first year through the whole admissions season.
Okay.
And if things were kind of normal, right, I'd be giving tours and interviewing families and all of that. So I look forward to that next year.
Gotcha.
But Eric and I are kind of part of the conversation at decision time, and then reaching out to those families early on post-acceptance.
So you're in the process right now.
Yeah. A little bit. Again, because of circumstances, not as much as I think I will be in the future, but yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's awesome, and such a great program.
Yeah.
To just get some different types of students to Gilman,
right.
and give them support that they need to thrive here.
Right. And I think there's there are lots of components to the boys in the program. And I think one thing that I've heard Timmy Howley talk about a lot is a lack of students, a middle class students at Gilman, and I think that's another thing that we are trying to address. Yeah.
Awesome. And then Beth, again, you wear so many different hats on campus. I don't know how you keep it all straight, but you are also the head of the One Love Foundation here at Gilman.
Yeah.
And that's been a successful program so far. We're a champion school.
We are a champion school. We're shooting for their next level up is some other thing.
There's more after champion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hero school maybe.
Wow.
And that would mean that we'd have to have more than 90% of the student body go through some sort of One Love programming.
So One Love Foundation is it's a program that was founded after the death of Yardley Love in 2008 maybe.
I think that sounds.
She was a senior.
Right, 2008, 2009 maybe. Yeah.
She was a senior lacrosse player at University of Virginia.
Yeah.
And tragically died.
Right.
But that program has had so much success, and being in the lacrosse community, it's all over the place.
Right.
How do we bring that? How did we bring that to Gilman, and how have you found success with it here?
I worked a little bit with trying to establish some One Love work at Georgetown Prep before I left there. One of my colleagues there was family friends with Yardley. My mom is good friends with Yardley's mom. And I taught at Prep, and George Hughley went to Landon. All of it just felt really close to me. Mm-hmm. And when I got here, I can't remember exactly how it all happened. And I don't know if there were just kind of some fledgling One Love stuff going on. But I kind of wanted to establish that a little bit more, and have been really lucky to work with some amazing students who have kind of taken it and run with it, right? And John Hay last year being a primary example of someone who's just so invested in a really inspirational way. And I think that has been contagious for other students. And this year, Ben Toohey, in the spring, he was certified as a One Love student ambassador, which takes a lot of work and meetings and learning. And he's done that again this fall, and he's leading great meetings that I kind of pop into and then pop out of because they have richer conversations without me there.
That's awesome.
And I really trust the leadership, that they know what they're talking about. I think this is another, sometimes I have a hard time prioritizing what's important to talk about with the boys, but certainly the notion of healthy relationships, recognizing healthy versus unhealthy relationships, and how to recognize, intervene.
Yeah.
It seems like there's not too much that's much more important than that. Right?
Yeah, and that's most of the conversations you guys have are centered around healthy versus unhealthy relationships.
Yes.
How do you facilitate conversations like that?
Yeah, so One Love is great because their programming and their material is available. So they have, videos and scenarios that they'll walk through, lesson plans, shared language. So all of that stuff is there, and we've just really utilized a lot of the work that the foundation has done. And in the last couple of years, they've expanded that a lot, and they've been a lot more inclusive in terms of different kinds of relationships. So using that, and then getting students who are trained like Ben, who is practicing having these kinds of conversations. And then the facilitation is really real at this point that I say, go with it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's true leadership when you can just delegate.
I'm not really sure, but I think it's more like Ben has been a real leader, and
Yeah.
we've had some really good students. John Hay, Mason the year before, Evan Gilbert, like those guys have been really instrumental. And I think one of my goals has been for us as a community to have that kind of language around healthy and unhealthy relationships, and not just romantic relationships, right? Recognizing that there are unhealthy friendships as well.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think especially at an all-boys school when they're not maybe as not comfortable, but girls aren't around all the time for them, and when they go to college, just having this foundation in place of what an unhealthy versus a healthy relationship looks like as they're forming these relationships in their life.
Right.
I think it's a great, ground to.
I think so.
Yeah.
I hope so. I mean, I think when they get to college, it becomes exponentially more complicated, right? When you're have some independence and there's maybe alcohol involved, and I think so by having a really firm foundation, hopefully here, then that's something that they can rely on when they get to college. And there's been a lot of parental concern around that too, right? I've had some really good, thoughtful conversations with parents in the community who are like, this is what we're worried about.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Awesome. Well, so Beth, I want to go back a little bit to your love for English and where that started, and you talked about your 9th grade teacher.
Yeah.
But maybe we can get into Georgetown and Loaf School.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in
I know
Loaf.
you are. I'm excited for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited.
You're just going to keep getting master's degrees? Is that your plan?
I guess so. Just be in school forever.
That's fine. I would love that.
I like school.
Yeah, I do too.
No shame.
I know. No. Own it.
But so maybe at Georgetown, how did you enhance your love for English literature? What are some of the classes you remember? How did that blossom from high school through undergrad?
I think it was that thing that we were talking about earlier of teachers and professors pointing out something that I was good at that I didn't quite realize, and that started before 9th grade, but I can remember like reading Romeo and Juliet and getting it, and my classmates not, right, or some of them not. I was like, oh.
You got that in 9th grade?
I was like, I get this. And I think that kind of continued for me in a way that was really like confidence building. At Georgetown, I got really into William Faulkner. I read a lot of Faulkner in college, and I think that there was a similar thing. And again, like in one of those classes, had a wonderful kind of eccentric, warm professor who was fascinated with Faulkner and just kind of translated that passion to me. So I think I had a series of experiences where I engaged with difficult texts and found it rewarding. I don't know, and I just, like that thing about consuming information. I'm such a nerd. I think I just like knowing stuff. So yeah, and I've always loved reading. And I don't think, I know you're a voracious reader. I'm not sure that I'm like on your level.
No, I bet you are.
No.
Really?
Yeah. I just feel like I read the same books over and over again as an English teacher at this point, and then like on breaks sometimes I like.
Well, that's been something for me that I'd never really reread books.
Yeah.
I would jump from one to another. I've already read that. I'm not going to pick it up again. But now being forced to reread, it's you notice it becomes so much more meaningful, and you notice so many, which is crazy.
Yeah.
My dad, I used to rewatch the same stupid movies. My dad would be like, "Why would you watch a movie twice?" But teaching English and reading books is another. Yeah. It's another thing. You should read books more than once.
Right.
Because you're first of all, you're different when you read it the second time.
Yeah, that makes a huge difference, right?
Yeah.
I think that I'm also just really fascinated by other people, and I think that's part of why I love to read and why I love teaching English is like being able to immerse myself in someone else's thoughts and world, and that's like endlessly fascinating for me. And I think teaches me a lot about, again, like who I am.
And I'm gonna ask you a question that I hate when people ask me this, because it's like, it's asking a musician their favorite song. It's like asking Robbie Ford his favorite concert.
Yeah.
But do you have a go-to favorite book that you just, when people ask you that question,
right,
that you love to read?
Oh my
It's so tough. And when people ask me this, I'm just like...
Well, and does this happen to you that your mind goes blank and it's just like...
Yeah, I think I was
I've never read a book.
I was asked this in an interview for an English job,
sorry.
and I was like,
have I read anything ever? I think the first book that pops in my mind is Beloved. That's like a rereader for me. And I have, like, when people in my life have read it, and I've kind of, like, read it alongside with them. That's been lovely. Sound and the Fury.
I read that this summer again. It's so tough.
I know. And I took a really amazing Faulkner class at Bread Loaf.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, which is one of my favorite Bread Loaf classes. Yeah, I think that those are probably top two.
Have you taught Beloved here?
I have not.
It's tough for high school, I'd say.
Yeah, I think so. And I only did 1 year of junior English, so yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And what was so did you do 5 summers in Vermont at
did
Bread
not.
Loaf, or did you do one in Oxford?
I did. And I did 4 summers.
4 summers.
I like
Knocked
and
it out.
I will not recommend that.
Okay.
So take my advice now. Because there was one summer I took 3 classes, and then I transferred like 1 in from Georgetown that I did at the end. That was my last summer, and I took 3 classes, and it was the King James Bible.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
And it was War and Peace. And then a film class, Jacobean Tragedy and Film Noir. My thought process there was that I was like, well, King James Bible, 1 book. War and Peace, 1 book.
You were reading King James Bible, War and Peace.
And Jacobean Tragedies and watching Film Noir. Yeah. Like over 6 weeks. Oh, yeah.
Oh my God.
That was a little intense.
Yeah.
I can't recommend it.
Wow. So War and Peace, how was that experience?
I don't like it.
Really?
Yeah. Maybe I would if, I'm not going to go back to it. I was going to say, maybe I would if I went back to it.
Very religious.
Yeah.
I mean, Tolstoy.
Yeah,
very religious, but I guess I would figure that reading King James Bible and War and Peace would be in
together.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
No.
I think I was just so mired in, like, I was trying to do so much.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I did my first summer in Oxford, which is, again, like, I'm going to give you lots of advice of things not to do.
Don't do that.
Oxford is amazing. Don't do your first summer in Oxford.
How come?
Because I think it's more enjoyable if you do it one of the later ones, or like people, it's an amazing graduation if you graduate from there.
Oh, true.
You know, like why not? But it's amazing. Like I had a great time, and I took a fabulous class and had a wonderful professor. And then the second summer I went to Asheville, which they used to have. I don't think they have Asheville anymore. And then I did 2 summers in Vermont. Yeah. It was like, again, I talk about all these things that can change me as a teacher, but it really changed me as a teacher to be in that intense of an environment, and just intense in terms of time and reading so much and so many brilliant people and producing, writing. It really made me a better teacher because it reminded me what it's like to be that person, right? And like trying to consume all the information and take constructive feedback and all of that. Yeah.
Do you write much now? Do you do any writing on your own?
I kind of fell off the wagon for a long time, and then like Patrick and I were talking before the beginning of the year, right? And of course our illustrious published author, department chair.
Are you writing a book too?
I am not writing a book.
When can we expect a book on King James Bible and War and Peace?
No. I'm a poet, so I've been writing poems, and I have a goal to write 20 poems before the end of the school year. And I think I'm on like number 8 right now.
Wow.
So it would be cool if I had like a draft or a chapbook or something.
That's awesome.
So I'm feeling pretty good about that.
Good for you. You have some side projects.
Some side projects. Mostly like in my head and in the notes app on my phone, but we're you know.
When's the clearest time for you to write? Like when do you find that, you know, peace or
right.
personal time, you know, amongst doing everything that you do, kids at home?
Yeah.
You kind of need a second to yourself to really write clear.
So I have lots of ideas while driving to and from Gilman. I have lots of ideas like wake me up in the middle of the night ideas. But actually writing, being at school is really good for me to write because like free period. I'm
sure even in class, like some of the things that the kids say is like probably strike you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's not, I'm not a gifted writer, but I think I notice a lot. And so just like paying attention and noticing like, there's just funny, interesting things that happen all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well,
Yeah.
Wish you the best of luck on your side projects.
Thank you.
Hope everything is going okay for you in these strange times, and sounds like you're doing pretty well with, as well as you really can do.
I think so.
So,
yeah.
Appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thank you
It was
for
a
having
really
me.
fun conversation.
Yeah. I feel like we have like 4,000 more things to talk about.
I know. We could go forever. Cesare and I were talking. We both love listening and watching podcasts, and some of these podcasts that come out are 4 hours long.
Yeah.
It's like that's a week right there. That,
right. Yeah.
But I think an hour is good for people. We can bring you back on. We're not going anywhere, hopefully. So
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
It's been fun.